Hello everybody and welcome to the Talking City podcast, brought to you by the Manchester Evening News. And we've got a hell of a job on our hands today because there is not much City to talk about. It's that dreaded second international break. The skies are getting darker, the rain has picked up, it's spooky, it's gloomy, it's a little bit depressing, but we get here nonetheless. And of course with me today is Mr. Simon Bajkowski. Si, how's it going?
Yeah, that was a cheery intro, wasn't it?
Gotta stay positive, even if, like, you know, as you can maybe out see out my window, and if you're watching this in living colour on YouTube, it's been so rainy today, and I'm really worried my roof's gonna leak again. But I'm gonna try and keep a sunny disposition, even if the sky is not.
And now I've got to get a pipe fixed, not a euphemism, and it's, you know, less than ideal to do because it's outside.
Are you going to do it, or are you going to get someone else to do it?
I think I'm going to get someone else to do it.
It's always the way. I've got
a bath drain that needs replacing that I might stretch to do it myself. That's kind of the extent of my
dangerous dealing with pipes, though. One wrong turn and...
Well, yeah, it burst ages ago, but it was like, well, there's no point doing it when it bursts. So, but you don't want it going too long, do you? And nobody probably wants to hear any of that tale. So
listen, I think we need time to kill, and DIY chat is as good as chat as any. Especially, we started this chat with some cricket talk at one point during the summer.
Yes,
before the World Cup so far.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of City to talk about, isn't there?
Oh, is there? Right. Well, you're being very optimistic.
Well, nothing new, but I mean, we've decided to take a look at, the start, which is, pretty substantial. More than 20% of the Premier League season is over. So,
yeah, it's a good sample size.
Yeah, I think so. We're getting towards that sample size that you'd want. So, yeah, plenty to chat about.
Yeah. Well, that is the idea for today's episode. We're going to kind of have a review of the season so far, nearly a quarter of the way in. So, as you say, substantial enough to kind of see what's going on, what's going wrong, what's going right, who's playing well and who's not, and how City are looking generally. As I say, 8 games into the Premier League season, just shy of a quarter, and you've had the Carabao Cup and Champions League matches to that, and of course the silverware already won with the UEFA Super Cup. It's already been a busy start of the season. It's almost as if, because it's been like a bad week to end on, it almost feels like things are a bit more negative than they are, because before that it was all guns blazing, 6 wins on the spin in the league, an additional 2 in the Champions League. As we've said before, it took City until February to win 4 matches on the spin last season, and they won the treble. So to have won 6 right out of the gate already, nearly the Wolves, if they hadn't lost at Wolves, it would have been a record number of wins for City in the league. But so it's hard to you don't want to forget all the good that's come, but the last week has kind of, maybe, I wouldn't say put a negative on it quite, but kind of maybe given a more kind of realistic look at where City at, because even though they were winning, they weren't exactly all guns blazing.
You're absolutely right on both counts, and we didn't really touch on that on Monday, so there are new things to say.
We found it.
Yeah, but how often do we talk, and how often does City talk about being sort of slow starters? So if they were sitting there having won 6 out of 8, being 2 points off top, and like the Champions League group is done now basically, after that away win in Leipzig. So if we were sitting there 6 from 8 and won the Super Cup, lost the Carabao Cup, we'd say, yeah, that's a really good start. But because those 6 wins came first, it's sort of like, a City crumbling away and things like that. And we're talking about the issues that City have. And yeah, at the same time, the performances in those 6 wins were not brilliant, and the performances in the recent defeats were not brilliant. But as we said on Monday, I think sort of the Wolves defeat was a lot worse than the Arsenal defeat, and we're seeing all this stuff about City's issues against Arsenal and what's going wrong, and there wasn't really much wrong. They lost to a grubby kick from outside the box that took a big deflection. Now, they weren't great against Arsenal, but Arsenal weren't great against them. So Again, if we were talking about a point away from home at Arsenal with a home game to come, that would be really, advantage City. But as it is, they've kind of thrown away a big chance. So, yeah, these kind of podcasts are good to sort of explore those nuances of what has been good and what hasn't, because we shouldn't get too carried away with the recent defeats, but also we shouldn't pretend that the starts before that was perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on Monday, and I'm sure you went in depth on kind of how Guardiola changed his system a bit to kind of work without Rodri, and I thought it worked quite well. It seems to be finally have had the solution. Me and Tyrone spoke last week ahead of the Arsenal game, saying Bernardo was probably the most feasible option to do it there, just because he's so good on the ball. He might not have quite have the defensive prowess or the strength that Rodri does, but he's certainly as good on the ball and at keeping it, and his energy, the way he can get about the pitch, is second to none in the Premier League pretty much. So I thought that worked really well. I feel like my Kovacic agenda continues to gather credence, considering he got very lucky to stay on the pitch, but he did, rash, reckless tackles aside, he thought he played a lot better in that more advanced dynamic box-to-box role than he did being kind of shackled as the CDM, and it wasn't quite one player holding, but Bernardo was definitely the deeper of the two. I thought he did really well. So it's kind of, I think, even if they did lose to Arsenal, it's good that they seem to now have a good backup plan and obviously Bernardo wasn't available for the Wolves match either, so maybe he would have played in that if he was, but it does seem now they do have that backup plan if Rodri is injured again. It might not be good long term or feasible for the long term. You still think they need a more kind of dedicated operator who they can rely on if need be, because clearly Calvin Phillips isn't. But that they have that backup option now and that rotation option if Rodri does need a rest. I think that's a big positive to come out of not a season-defining defeat, but a defeat that could and should give Arsenal a whole lot of confidence going into this kind of really business part of the season now in the middle.
Yeah, I think so. And, John Stones came back. John Stones can play that role. Nunes and Kovacic, when they're later down the line in their kind of City education, might be able to play that role. What it did highlight is how important Bernardo Silva has been this season and how important it was to keep him out of PSG's clutches and Barcelona's clutches, I suppose, but they never had the money. But, Bernardo Silva can play pretty much anywhere on the pitch and can do a really good job. And yet you're not getting the best out of his skill set to play him as like a holding midfielder, just kind of keeping his foot on the ball. But he is so good that he is still better than anyone else in the team at doing that role when Rodri's not there in those circumstances. So, Guardiola spoke the other week about, Bernardo being his character and, the shorthand that he has with him, and they have a really good relationship. And he's one of those players where Guardiola can tell him what he needs and Bernardo Silva will do it straight away. And, you can't really underestimate how priceless that is. So, if you're thinking about who is, it's hard to say that Bernardo Silva has been one of the best players as such. He probably has, but he's certainly been like one of the top three important players in their starts of the season for his ability to play just anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I think we've all known how crucial he's been for, he was playing left back last season when things were going a bit awry, and even though he's clearly not very well suited to it, he still managed to do a good job at times, and it's clear how important he is and how crucial it was that they kept him during the summer. But as you said earlier there, like City are kind of slow starters, inverted commas, and that's always been like by design. Guardiola, I think he said it ahead of Arsenal, in fact, he's saying like as long as we're still, always the humble man, but as long as we're still within touching distance and in the race by February and into the knockout stages, like he's happy. But that hides the fact that he doesn't want his team going gung-ho, hell for leather, playing their absolute best now, because if you burn out so soon, kind of a bit like what Arsenal discovered last year, if you burn out and fade away before it really matters, you're not then coming up at the right time to steamroll your opponents and go on win the league. Starting really well is good and impressive and can build confidence, but if you don't have the longevity to go for the full 9 months, you're going to fade away at the crucial time, and especially with City got a Club World Cup to come later on this year, of course, and then will be wanting to go long in the Champions League again. I feel like people can really panic, get jittery in the early stages of the season when City aren't at the best, and it's happened pretty much every year. They don't need to be doing the absolute best football they can do just now. It's more about just getting the results, clicking along, getting the new signings kind of accustomed to the system and whatnot, and do it kind of, I wouldn't say the bare minimum, but almost to that extent, just getting the results without trying as little as possible, really. And then when it really matters, that's when you turn it on. And I'd be interested. I think obviously you remember the big knockout matches and the big kind of Premier League clashes more, but I'd be very interested to know, like, City's undefeated streaks tend to come from like January, December onwards, and I'd wonder if you look back through Guardiola's time at the club, like how many of his biggest wins and the most impressive wins have come, past the New Year mark in the season.
Yeah, it's kind of two-pronged, isn't it? There's the physical and mental aspect of sort of not overloading at the start of a season. The performance team are very deliberate in that they don't want the team tired come March, April, and I think that is something that they've really worked on and got bang on last year. And there's also kind of the psychological element of it, and that kind of shouldn't be dismissed either, in the sense of, like, as much as sort of you don't want to be going for broke on the pitch in October, you don't want to be treating every game as must win, because it's exhausting, and you can't go through a whole season thinking I must win every game, because
the emotional turmoil.
Yeah, it's too much pressure and too high expectations. Like, you've got to admit that you're not going to be at your best all the time, and it's sort of like there was a good article in the Mail at the end of last season by Marty Perronow, who wrote Pep Confidential, the book, so knows Pep pretty well. He said Pep kind of treats the season like golf, in that all 18 holes are important, but you can't win a round of golf on any one hole. You just have to be consistent, but you can lose a round of golf on one hole if you blow up so badly. So City kind of, try and win every game, but if they're not winning, what they don't want to do is lose so badly that it has consequences for, like, future things. And that's why, got red cards and things like that annoy Guardiola so much, because not only do they reduce your chance of winning in one game, they also have knock-on effects for the next one or few, as we've seen with Rodri. So it's City kind of would have rather beaten Arsenal, but I don't think there are any kind of red flags from that, or the Wolves games that they will be bothered about, because you just can't be thinking about, like, winning the treble now.
No, absolutely not. And as you say, like, the Arsenal game was a much more controlled match. Arsenal are a quality team. I think they probably deserved a kind of a loaded term, but I think they probably edged it with the second half performance. They certainly got the ascendancy a little bit more, and that's fair. But other than that, it was pretty even Steven for most of the game. And City weren't dazzling, but they were a lot more controlled, solid, had good chances, and that was just such a contrast to that Wolves match, which was so frantic, so end to end, a game of transitions, which is like pretty much the antithesis of what Guardiola ever aims for. He God forbid me, if he had any hate, I'm sure he'd be pulling it out against Molineux, because it was so you couldn't take your eyes off. If you looked down for a moment, the ball would have changed hands and a chance would be going at the other end. It was such unlike a Guardiola game, whereas Arsenal was much more in line with what you expect. Two teams, and Arteta learned from under that Guardiola tree as a similar sort of system. It was kind of two teams figuring each other out, cancelling each other out in a way, nullifying. And as you say, the lucky break went their way, but it was clear that Wolves game, when they couldn't replace Rodri as they would have wanted, and Kovacic really couldn't do that role, as I've said numerous times, that was a blip on the radar, and we have kind of returned to the normality. Now, as we said, City haven't been performing the best so far this season. Part of that's by design, but what has been kind of going wrong, again, inverted commas, so far this year? Why haven't they what's not quite been clicking?
Difficult to put your finger on one thing. I think defensively they've been better than they have been going forward, but there have been kind of just a few blips that have sort of spoiled the card a bit, because I think they've sort of defensively they're the best team in England or in Europe for the amount of chances they've conceded, but that hasn't necessarily transferred to sort of actual goals conceded. Things like, letting in that equaliser against Sheffield United or against Fulham. There's just been a few sloppy moments that have let them down. Going forward, I think you see it's been difficult for them to sort of keep Haaland connected and in the game. I did a piece this morning about kind of which players have been used most this season compared to last season, and there's only 5 out of 10 that are the same, and most of those are defenders. So whereas last season you had De Bruyne and Gundogan and Mahrez and Jack Grealish and Bernardo Silva all in that group, now you've only really got I think it's Kovacic, Alvarez and Foden. So that kind of speaks about how different the midfield looks now, and the whole basis of last season was, can City play in a way that gets enough bodies and runners close to Haaland? Well, if you automatically play more defenders, then it's going to be harder for your midfield players to get close to Haaland, and that's not even taking into the fact that you've got players who weren't playing as regularly last season, so aren't going to be as used to doing it. So I think it's a sign of the summer turnover that there was, really significant exits, and then De Bruyne's injury on top of that means that they are missing that kind of link between midfield and attack. I think that means that the goals that they are conceding are becoming a bit more relevant because they're not scoring as many.
Well, I think for me, like, the biggest change, which has kind of led to both the defence and the attack not being quite as kind of on key as it was last year, is that Stones has been out. Stones was so important to that system finally clicking last year, and Haaland's pretty much been scoring regardless of what was happening, but there was clearly a moment, the first half of the season, where he was scoring without really ever being involved much in the play, as you say, and the second half of the season that improved drastically because City could get players closer to him, and that was all because Stones was doing that, stepping into the midfield, allowing another midfielder to step further up and be closer to Haaland, usually kind of, either De Bruyne or Gundogan. And it made City so solid in the middle, and they were just, everything was working just like clockwork. Now, without Stones, he's kind of changed it to Walker being the defender to go into midfield, which is made him basically a right winger, which has pushed Foden inside, and that's just not worked as well, because you've had Foden and Alvarez kind of stepping on each other's toes, operating in the same area. Then you've either had Kovacic or Nunes coming forward, again operating in the same area. You've had either Doku or, well, mostly Doku, but then occasionally Grealish on the left, who kind of been pushed further wide than they would have liked as like a kind of a left wing back role, because it's been like a lopsided 3-5, well, 3-5-1, whatever it is. And it just feels like the balance of the team's just been completely knocked off kilter just from the simple change of, instead of the centre-back going into the middle, or even if Stones was at right-back, he was still going into the middle in a centre midfield position. And that change of the defender going to the wing is just, I feel like it's just lopsided the whole team. And as a result, the creative kind of centre has got so congested, and Haaland hasn't had any real support as a result. And what's it now? Is it 3 games in a row without a call now? Now, that is not a crime to stick him up for, in front of the Geneva Convention for, but it's been quite noticeable recently. His touches have kind of reduced drastically. He's not been involved as much, and it's not that he's not scoring. He's not really had many clear-cut chances in the last few games, I don't think, either, which is probably the more worrying trend. But thankfully Stones is now back, so you'd like to think he gets through the international break back full fit. We might see a return of what worked so well last year.
Yeah, it's kind of been, I would say sort of, Arsenal and Wolves, he didn't really get a chance. but maybe Leipzig and a few other games he has had chances and hasn't taken them. I don't think he's as sharp. It's mad because I wrote the other day he's got 8 goals in 8 league games, so he's on course for like 38 league goals, which would be a record. But it doesn't feel like he's scored as many as 8.
No.
But I checked this morning actually just how many he'd scored in his first 8 league games last season. Any guesses?
Was it like 12 or 13 or something mad? Because he scored 2 hat-tricks quite early, didn't he?
It was 15.
Yeah, I remember
3
he scored loads. Yeah.
So, so he scored basically half the number of goals he got last season, which is, pretty mad. But at the same time, he's still on for like record-breaking form. So there's a long time for that to turn around. It's I sort of gave a big long answer and neglected to mention John Stones being injured as a big factor. I kind of think City got a bit lucky with injuries last season, but have been a bit unlucky this season. And we mentioned kind of Wolves as probably the worst performance this season, and we talk about kind of, like you say, Arsenal was a lot better, Leipzig was a lot better, just because it had that control that they lost at Wolves that is so unlike a Guardiola team. But Wolves was probably the low point for injuries and suspensions as well. It's probably when they had the most key players out, so that kind of can't be forgotten either. So, after the international break, if all goes well, then Guardiola will have everyone apart from De Bruyne to pick from, and you should start to see better performances and performances that are kind of more familiar with what we're used to seeing.
Well, we'll bring part 1 of the Talking City podcast to a close there. We'll be back in just a moment where we'll kind of delve into who's played well and who's played not so well in the first quarter of the season. Don't go anywhere. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We've been a bit, I wouldn't say negative, but we've been kind of analytical and critical of what's been kind of going a little bit awry in the first quarter of the season. Again, it's hardly bad considering the third in the league joint, just behind 2 points behind Tottenham and Arsenal, so not a bad position at all. So, but let's be a bit more positive. Who's been like the kind of the best performers so far? I think the standout really, and maybe a bit surprisingly so, has been Julian Alvarez. Now he hasn't got as many goals as Haaland, as you say. He's got 6 compared to 8, but he's been scoring important goals. And he's kind of been stepping up and making crucial kind of decisive moments when Haaland maybe hasn't been. I did the numbers the other day, and I think 5 of his 6 goals have all been, and it might even be all of them, but definitely 5 have all been to either put City ahead or draw them level. Some cases when he scored twice, I think against, was it Fulham? Yeah, he scored the opener and then the goal that put him ahead. So he scored 6 goals, but they've all been a lot of them have been really good finishes. The Leipzig one, especially in his free kick against Wolves, immediately jumped to mind. But they're all coming at like important moments as well. It's not just as if he's kind of tapping the 5th one in a 5-1 win. He's really stepped up and making himself, as Guardiola said himself, an undroppable player.
Yeah, it's really hard for him because he's not Erling Haaland and he's not Kevin De Bruyne. So it's when you judge against kind of those players, it's almost unfair because they are, 2 of the best players, not just in the world, but probably 2 will have ever played the game. But he has made the position in his team his own, and he's kind of played as, anywhere between an 8, a 10 and a 9, and kind of just been there when it mattered, and come up with important goals and assists. Like you say, he's kind of really come on. He's probably stood out more than Foden in the middle, which again is no kind of easy task. And yeah, I would say he is, certainly in the top 3 for performers this season. And you could probably make a case for him being top just because of how influential he's been.
Absolutely. I didn't think he performed quite as well when he was kind of having to play a bit wider against Arsenal. It definitely seems like that number 10 role is his home, which will kind of give Guardiola an interesting dilemma when, and hopefully sooner than later, De Bruyne is finally back. But I think, while Alvarez has maybe been like the standout and maybe the unexpected kind of best player, I think the undisputed continued best player is, of course, Rodri. And if it wasn't already blatantly obvious, the last 3 matches without him have made it clear just how integral he is to this team and how good he is. I mean, a defensive midfielder probably never gets the best player in the world award or the Ballon d'Or or anything, even though Kante did win player of the season, didn't he, that year for Chelsea. But he's probably like the best player in the world, really, because no one can do what he does, and he's so good at it. Obviously, Mbappe and Haaland will get all the and Vinicius and Bellingham probably the more exciting players will get those plaudits. But it's hard to look past Rodri of just absolute world class elegance.
Yeah. It's sort of, you've kind of got to forget that Nottingham Forest game. But aside from that, he was the best holding midfielder in the world kind of at the end of last season, and then since that he's then added more goal threat. And we talk about players being unable to replace him, and it's like, well, yeah, you can't have more than one of him, and the sort of the disjointedness with the attack and Haaland, it sort of, Rodri covers that because he's so good, because he can almost do the job of 2 players, whereas it takes 2 players to do his job, which then removes another player from your attack, and it's it's a blindingly obvious point, but everyone said, oh, Rodri's City's most important player. If they miss him, then they'll be in trouble, and they have missed him, and they have been in trouble. So he has, again, like with Rodri and with Kyle Walker, I would say it's kind of a testament to them and to the setup at City with Guardiola that they're still getting better. Like Walker's 33 and has improved his attacking game, albeit from a low bar, but like he's noticeably improved as an attacker. And Rodri, I think 27 maybe, 28, but I think 27.
27, yeah.
And is adding things to his game still. It's just very, very impressive to see.
Has anyone else kind of caught your eye this year, or been particularly standing out? I feel like everyone's kind of not coasting, but everyone's seemed in like most people middle ground, 6 to 7 out of 10. But has anyone else kind of stood out?
No, don't think so. I can't really.
Well, Walker, I think Walker is a good one. The turnaround he's had, bench for the Champions League final, couldn't hide his disappointment in that, but remained professional. Came on, of course. We heard what he said to his teammates before the game. His inspirational speech could have gone. Looked like he may well have gone in the summer, but to stay, sign a new deal, and got the captain's armband on now while De Bruyne is injured, you'd imagine, and playing every single minute other than the Carabao Cup. That's some turnaround.
Yeah, he's made himself essential to the team again. And you saw kind of the way on Sunday he dealt with Martinelli when he came on. I know Martinelli scored the winning goal as it turned out, but if you restricting Martinelli to shots from outside the box, you're doing pretty well. And he cut him down plenty of times, as that clip has gone round of him coolly taking the ball past Gabriel Jesus, who ends up sort of sliding past him. I think kind of, Walker, Bernardo, Alvarez and Rodri have been the standout players.
On the other end of the scale, who's kind of not been quite performing to pass? It's hard to call Haaland with 8 goals, and but obviously not performing to his very best at such a high standard that is. But is anyone else kind of maybe a bit underwhelmed so far?
You feel like Haaland, like you say, Haaland could be doing better for his ceiling. Foden probably could be doing better for his ceiling as well. Phillips has not played poorly, but his lack of appearance is kind of damning for him. He's there as the holding midfielder second to Rodri, and other than the Carabao Cup, which Pep basically threw away, he's not played in any of the 3 games without Rodri. So, he's courageous of him to stay and fight for his place, and he talks a very good game, but he's still not been able to back that up yet on the pitch.
We're going to talk about Jeremy Doku in just a moment. What have you kind of made of like the Grealish backlash sort of thing to his like contributions to the side? He's been injured obviously, and he's only just coming back, but left on the bench against Arsenal, which I think kind of sends alarm bells, and didn't come on against Wolves till I think the 80th minute with Oscar Bob coming on at half time. It kind of, maybe it's just because he's feeling his way back from injury and he's not 100% yet, but it's a bit alarming. I'd think that, when City maybe they weren't really chasing a goal till really late on against Arsenal, but against Wolves they certainly needed one, and Grealish doesn't seem to be seen as a player to come on to try and change things to get that goal. Where's he stand at the moment?
Yeah, I think there are 2 aspects to it. I think the first is that, yes, there is a sense that he could be doing better, and recall him kind of when we were at Burnley on the opening night and he didn't play a single minute and then was out doing kind of advanced or prolonged shuttle runs after the game. Is that kind of a fitness thing? Or he has had a few games recently where he's not been picked either to come on or to start, where you think maybe that wouldn't have happened last season. Maybe he needs to be doing more. But at the same time, the sort of online war against him is just ridiculous and stupid, and a sign of people who don't understand City and the way they play, and don't understand what Grealish offers to the team. It was a surprise that Grealish didn't play at Arsenal because of the control that he offers. Exactly. But Pep saying afterwards kind of he wanted control in the middle, which is why he sort of had Silva and Kovacic and Lewis in there, which, fair enough. Again, maybe a sign Grealish, had he were he to be in better form, he might have played. But at the same time, Grealish has not done very much wrong, and Jeremy Doku has not done much at all for the sort of online spectrum to be so far in favour of Doku over Grealish.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll kind of move on to kind of maybe assessing how the new summer signings have done so far. So we'll start with Doku, and I think that the way that he's kind of, fans have just become enamoured with him is because he's kind of so different to what City have had for years. He's almost a throwback to kind of Leroy Sané in the fact that he's just a really kind of old school winger, gets the ball, wants to run at defenders, wants to take them on, wants to shoot, wants to do exciting things, and Grealish, by design, doesn't do that as often. It's his job to keep the ball, to cut inside, to bring it back, and it might not be as exciting to watch, but it leads to treble wins, doesn't it? Now Doku, he's looked good, he's looked fun. Guardiola said after the West Ham match, you can't believe how well he's playing. Scored that goal against West Ham. He scored a good one against Leipzig as well. He's certainly, I don't think he's certainly doing better than I thought he'd maybe do. He's been highly rated for a long time, but he's had his injury problems. He didn't have the greatest record over at Rennes. So I don't know if I was expecting much of him, but I think he's exceeded those expectations so far. But as you say, the thinking was ahead of Arsenal, would it be Grealish or Doku? And it was neither of them, which I think, it shows that they're both of pretty much an equal standing at the moment, as Guardiola's already said himself. Yeah,
I think he's ahead of where everyone, including people at City, thought he would be at this stage. Played tremendous. Well, had a very, very nervous debut at home. Then played really, really well at West Ham. Since he's done all right, he's taken on, he loves taking on his defenders. It's great to watch. But you do lose that control. He came on against Arsenal, had 4 or 5 dribbles, lost the ball every time. Would Arsenal have had that ball to play it long and Martinelli to score if he'd put on Grealish instead of Doku? Who knows? I think it's kind of it will be a learning process where Doku learns exactly when to go, and City learn how much license to give him. He looks good. He looks like 55 million in today's market will end up pretty good value for a player that looks like he can, once he hits his stride, kind of terrorise a lot of defences.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask. Like, do you think that'll get coached out of him a bit? Will he become more of Grealish's mould, or does Guardiola kind of want him to be that kind of difference maker?
I think he'll want him to be the difference maker, but if we think back to when Leroy Sané was there, like, Guardiola didn't take any of Sané's attacking instincts out of him, but he did expect him to work back and defend like the rest of the team. So it won't just be like a free license to always lose the ball. And there will be times where Grealish or someone else is the better option because they offer more control or more whatever. So it's I wouldn't expect him to be the sort of player that plays every week.
No, of course not. But one you'd expect to play a bit more regularly is Mateo Kovacic. What have you made of his start?
Good. Looked very good when Rodri was in the team. Looked less good without him. I mean, obviously it was stupidity on Sunday to dive in for that second tackle after he'd been let off with the first one. So that will have to be watched. I think he looks he's more settled than Núñez is because he's been in the team for longer. I think it helped him having that pre-season to really kind of settle into the team, and he's clearly kind of ahead of Calvin Phillips in the pecking order. So he's done a lot right since he joined, and 25 million looks very, very good money for him. But yeah, he has kind of dipped a bit since Rodri was suspended.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's understandable when you take the fulcrum out of the midfield. But another midfielder, as you mentioned there, Matheus Núñez comes in amid some controversy, a big fee as well. But I've honestly been quite surprised. I thought he was unlucky to get hooked against Wolves. I thought he was City's best player in that first half, and he's just much kind of more attacking than I expected him to be. I thought he was basically the new Rodri stand-in to basically push Phillips further down the pecking order, but he's not that at all. He's clearly seen as the more like a kind of more of a Gundogan replacement sort of thing, of a dynamic player to carry the ball and run beyond defences, and he looks like he's got a nice bit of pace on him, really confident kind of taking the ball. And again, as you say, once he kind of gets more in tune with what he's wanted from it, City, I think they've got quite a good player on their hands there. Maybe not the best in the world, but
yeah, Núñez is an interesting one because he's sort of like you have to kind of accept that he will take time to settle, but at the same time, this is a guy that they went out and bought after seeing him like dominate United on the first weekend of the season, so he should kind of be Premier League ready. I can't say I've seen any kind of like domination from him or any kind of real influence in a game. He came on for Foden against West Ham and was sort of quietly good. I saw a clip from the weekend being like, masterclass when he came on against Arsenal, and I sort of just associate him coming on with City losing control of the midfield again, which they'd had before he came on. So I sort of didn't see how he did anything notable against Arsenal. I just think he's not had much time. Obviously, he was the latest in after the sort of the late bid for him, and he was clearly not first choice. But he's shown potential. But I'm just waiting to see whether he will get to that point in the team where, like City watched him against Wolves and he was the standout player. I'm not sure how he gets to be that at City.
And finally, Josko Gvardiol costing quite a bit much than the other signings. Been in and out of the side, in centre-back and left-back. It doesn't really seem like he's got a settled position yet, but promising signs. Just again, it's kind of the trend of just needs time to settle, really.
Yeah, he looks good on the ball. He doesn't look as good defensively, but then he's playing left back, which he has done before, but he's a centre back by trade. Not entirely sure why he's playing left back instead of centre back so often. Whether it's just that Pep trusts other centre backs more and left back's kind of a less risky position.
He delivered a great cross against Arsenal at one point when he ran down the wing.
Yeah.
It was a really great ball. So I can see why he might have that quality, but I do agree. He's like, I think he played left back 5 times when he first went to Leipzig, and then they quickly realised, no, he's a centre back, and then he never played there again. So it does seem a bit weird.
Yeah. I think it's probably one of those risk factors for Guardiola, but he's a very, very young centre-back, and City have bought him for the long haul, and he looks like he will just be there and kind of just end up like a Rolls Royce, just strutting around.
Absolutely. Well, we'll bring the first quarter season assessment to a close there. Thank you all very much for listening to the Talking City podcast. As I said earlier, of course, you can watch this in living colour on our YouTube channel if you so desire, with plenty more great video content for your eyeballs to enjoy. Go over to Manchester Evening News Man City on YouTube, and of course, we're on all the other social media channels as well. TikTok at Manchester Evening News Man City, Facebook Manchester Evening News Man City, and Twitter, of course, or X, whatever you like to call it, at Man City MEN. But until next week, when we'll be scraping around from something else to talk about, hopefully City's international stars do some stuff that's newsworthy. But we'll be back next week to talk all things City here on the Talking City podcast. But until then, it's goodbye for now. Ta-ra.